y'all ready to head off the trails? I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones, and I'm ready to take you on a mysterious journey right now. We welcome you to Off the Trails right here on the Spaced Out Radio YouTube channel. If you guys haven't hit subscribe yet, please do. We would love to have you. You guys can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. You guys can find me at thecryptidhuntress.com, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress. I've got some pretty awesome daytime shows and remote viewing shows over there, and so I would love to have you guys subscribe to my channel. Okay. Also, y'all go shop at my Etsy store. It's War Woman Goods. That's all one word jumbled together. War Woman Goods. And also I have a Patreon if anyone would like to become a member. I post all of my remote viewing data for all these wacky targets I do over there. It's really cool. Okay. Also, y'all come visit me. We're going to have a fan party in Las Vegas, the Spaced Out Radio fan party that's May the 19th through the 22nd, Las Vegas at the Golden Nugget. We're going to be broadcasting live from Vegas and doing a whole bunch of other really fun stuff. Also, you guys can find me on April the 1st at the Georgia Bigfoot Conference. I'll be presenting there. And in Grafton, Illinois at the Journey to Truth Conference, May 22nd through the 25th. So y'all come see me live and direct in person. Okay. Well, I have a fantastic guest here with me tonight. I have Josh Turner here from Paranormal Round Table. And so don't forget that right after this show, After Hours has a really awesome program set up for us. Don't miss that. All right. Okay, let's get to our guest. Josh Wolf Turner is host of Paranormal Round Table, a place to collect and discuss real accounts of encounters with supernatural cryptids, demonic, and everything else in between. And I know that Josh has had his own personal experiences with cryptids, and we're going to talk about some of these encounters tonight. So please help me welcome to Space Out Radio, Josh Turner.
Hey.
Hey, Josh. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Of course. It's always a pleasure having you on. And you have such a big audience, and they follow you over here, and they are the coolest. Yes.
That's awesome. My fans travel. That's good.
I love. Have fans. We'll travel. Yes.
I guess that's a draw, right?
No, well, that's, you know what? I have a lot of really awesome friends and family, and I consider the people who watch my shows my family, my good friends.
Me too.
And it's a pleasure because when I go on other people's shows, a lot of them come along. So it's a big old family over here with Paranormal Round Table. And
you're getting big too. You're getting kind of you're becoming known. That's good. That's
I'm getting big. Do I need to go on a diet? Is that what you're saying? Is that a fat joke?
No, but I do. I got, man, I tell you, we got frozen in over here for days and no electricity for 2 days. Luckily, our house is gas, and so we were able to take showers. So
oh my gosh,
stay warm with that. I mean, but it was rough, man. Me and the pets and we all had to jump in the car, the SUV, and then we were driving around looking for a hotel, and everything was either unavailable because there was no electricity or they were sold out. So we decided to go back to the house, and we sat there for an hour, and then the lights came back on.
Oh, thank goodness. Do you have a fireplace or like
yes, I did. Stove? And that ended up causing the carbon monoxide deal to go off. So the fire department had to come and check it. And it was just because we ran it for like 2 days or whatever. So yeah, it was a big mess. But anyway, everything's fine. I'm alive. I hurt my leg yesterday, and I just was in so much pain.
Oh, no.
But
Josh,
it's really weird. Like I put I have an old scar that opened up real bad, and it was just bleeding, and it was like it hurt really bad. It swelled up. I posted on Facebook. I'm like in pain but alive, and then I'm not joking. Like 200 people said, "Oh, we'll pray for you." And guess what? I'm not joking. Within the hour, the pain subsided. I mean, like it was like it's
the power of prayer, man.
I'm not kidding. And then the swelling went down, and now it's just like there's a little, because I had a slight fracture there on my shin where from years ago. But anyway, enough about that. What are we talking about tonight?
You better take care of yourself, Josh. Seriously,
I'm trying. I'm trying.
You got stuff to do out here, and I was wondering, are you planning to have another Dogman Roundtable this year? Because you had a fantastic event last year that I missed, and I would love to be able to attend one this year if you have one.
Sure. Yeah, that's happening
Yeah.
in September, and I went over the dates. I was on the phone with Ken and Barton, Ken Gerhardt, and we
Yeah.
were discussing the semantics of that and what we were going to do. Probably going to bring back everyone from last year, and then add a few more people, and then maybe make it a day and a half. Because
Good
I was
idea.
told that it wouldn't be, people wouldn't do it if it was a day and a half. But I guarantee you, more people would have done it. It was a lot of people that wanted it to keep going. It ended about 10 o'clock at night. And I guess because the Bigfoot crowd's a little different, they were just like, but this was more of a Paranormal Round Table crowd that showed up, and there were altogether there was 486 attendees. So,
wow.
but that's counting, the staff and everybody that was there. There was almost 500 people in the building.
Wow.
So,
I'd actually planned to be there too. And I didn't know you guys at all. I think I met you just before the week before the conference, pretty much. I came on your show, or you came on mine. I can't remember. But I was going to head up there with Grumpy, my friend Bob. He used to be the Region 5 director of the Dogman project. And we were planning on riding up there together. And he didn't feel like going. That. He got sick. Yeah. We're not talking about that tonight. No, we're going to talk about other stuff.
Let's get into some. So what
we're going to talk about some cool stuff. Oh, I got a lineup for us tonight. Okay.
Just tell me whatever you want to talk about, and I'll give you whatever I got.
Oh, okay. I've got at least 3 things that I really want to touch on tonight with you, because there's one of them is clones. Okay. Because I was watching your show. By the way, anyone in the chat or anyone watching live tonight, or whenever you're watching this, please go subscribe to Paranormal Round Table. It's one of the best shows out there. Okay. Josh, you do a fantastic job. You were talking about clones the other night. Okay. Clones. And that's something that I've been talking about. And it's just, I don't know if it's just in the ethers, or like it's just in the collective consciousness, or there's just clones all around us right now.
I just actually, before the show, I was actually messaging someone about winning some merchandise, because he didn't win, but he's been a supporter of the show. And so I'm going to go do the mail offs tomorrow. If anybody who's listening who's won, I saw Adam Ware in the deal. I was trying to get a hold of you. Adam really wants a hoodie. I said, okay, fine. Get in touch with me. I messaged you. So I was messaging this guy, and when I was going back to his messages, it came up about clones, a conversation that we had had.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, and that's weird. Right before the show that we were talking about that.
Synchronicities.
So do you want to start with that, or what do you want?
Yeah, let's just start with clones. I'll tell you kind of where my head's at on this right now.
Okay.
Is I did a show. Jesus Payan. He's been on your show. Yeah. He's the one that kind of opened me up to a lot of this with the orphan trains. Okay, back in the day, and the human resets, and babies and incubators at the world fairs and things like that. And it's kind of snowballed, okay, with the research that I've been doing. And I don't know if you're familiar with Brown Dwarf. He's a friend of mine. He's been on the show. And we've talked about all this.
All the time, yeah.
Yeah, Brown's awesome. But we've really been diving into this stuff and looking into it. And there's other podcasts, Mind Unveiled or something, I think is what they're called. They've been putting out some great videos about this, where there's been possible human cloning going on for centuries. Okay. And all these orphans that were coming in from these orphan trains, and it's just odd. Okay. And it feels fabricated. Like, there have been clones being made and put into all over the world. And so I was listening to your show the other night, and you were talking about clones, and there was a story about a mother whose son had gone to war, and he came home and it wasn't her son. Yeah. Okay. And I just thought maybe you and I could have a conversation about this tonight, or maybe you could tell that story because it kind of goes hand in hand with what I've been talking about lately about clones.
Yeah. And first I want to address something someone in the chat said. This guy's incapable of looking in the camera. That's because my camera's up here and I'm looking down at the screen to see Jessica. So when I'm on my show, like a lot of times I'll look at the camera and then look back down, because that's how my studio's set up. I apologize that if I'm not looking directly at the screen like a creepy weirdo, but that's just how I do things. So
I'm just glad that we can see you, Josh. You look good. Well, thank you for being here.
It is what it is. I just wanted to address that I'm not like, it's not because I can't, whatever. I just, if I look at I'm not able to see you. So
don't you worry about it.
Here's the thing about the cloning thing. I'll go way back into antiquity. I don't mean Roman antiquity. I don't mean Greek. I don't mean Minoan. I mean like beyond the flood. I'm talking to the Garden of Eden. When you look at what they were doing in the book of Genesis, and a lot of people aren't going to like this because they want to believe in this little very rigid, this very regimented religious system that they believe in. I believe in Christ, first of all, and God. But I do not believe that the book of Genesis is completely like, I don't believe that is, I believe it's like a history book kind of telling us, hey, this is what happened. There was something there before Genesis, because even the book of Job predates Genesis. And I think that Adam was a clone. And I'll tell you why, because they had to put him to sleep, which is basically sedation. Okay. God ordered him to be put to sleep, and they took from his rib and they made a woman because they said he needed a companion. What he was to me was he would have been a clone. And then, of course, I think they gave them the ability to procreate and breed. And I think there was a discussion that probably took place. When you look at the Sumerian tablets, gosh, it's not even, it goes so beyond that. It goes like into India, into the Tamil culture. They have all these records of like the gods, the Popol Vuh with the Mayans. There's all these civilizations that are no longer here, but a lot of them are still here, like the Egyptians. And they talk about our ancestors, and they have a memory of our ancestors. And I believe that life cycles being what they are, I was looking at my news feed or my Facebook feed, and somebody had a mantis, a 300 million year old mantis in amber. And of course, I commented on
Barry Littleton had that on his page.
Amber.
Yeah.
That's who it was Barry. I need to get him on my show, by the way.
It was Barry.
You need to reach out to Barry.
And Barry's a good friend.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, Barry's a very good friend of mine.
A lot of good information. And so
yeah,
I said something about that on a different like thread, like way before. Like he had something, but there was something similar to that. It was like an ant. It was an amber. It was a giant ant. And somebody said, "Oh, the Earth's only 5,000 years old. That's not possible." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." That is a very closed off view. If you believe that, if you really believe that the earth is that young, okay, that gives very little to all these civilizations that were basically Stone Age civilizations. I call them Stone Age because they were still building with stone. They didn't have any power or anything like that. That goes back to 12,000 years ago, which I believe the flood was around that time, which would have coincided with the end of the Ice Age. Like that, there was a period called the Younger Dryas. And when you look at that period, that's where there was a cataclysm that took place, an extinction level event. And I believe that we as people have been like rebooted. And what I mean by that is like jump started over and over again. We keep getting knocked down to a 0 level civilization. And we have to start back over, which I think is about to happen again, because we have totally mucked things up down here. And when you look at the cloning, it's, I believe that we came this last time was the reboot with Adam. I believe that was the reboot. Now, if you look at Methuselah, who was Noah's grandfather, he was 6 generations removed from Adam. So he was very, he was close to that generation. There's no way that if you look at the history of the civilization of our planet, there's no way that is just, we're that young. There's no way. So there was something that was there before what we know of as God. Now, these beings that would be the top of the heap of the caste system that created us, their leader would have been looked at as a god because he can probably live for 30,000 years. Because if you look at the Sumerian tablets, these kings that in this, in ancient Sumeria, they had a period where there were only 8 rulers for 200,000 years. So you're dividing it up and you're going like 240,000 years. 8 times 3 is 24. So they lived about 30,000 years apiece, roughly.
It's a long time.
That would have been the Tetra Yuga. That was the time where people lived, or the Satya Yuga, I'm sorry, where people lived to be like 100,000, and then the Tetra Yuga was 10,000. But if you are able to tap into the God energy and assign yourself with that energy, you could probably double or triple your lifespan. But it would only be something that would be reserved for the upper caste. What I mean by that is if you were like one of the bosses, you could live to be that old. If we as human beings, for our lifespan, which is like that of a fruit fly compared to them, these people had 12 strands of DNA. We have 3. I mean, it's like we're that are open. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
On average, 2 to 3. We're very, very down the totem pole from these people or these beings. So cloning would be nothing to them. It would be like you would just make an army, a whole world of clones. There are only 26 facial archetypes in the entire world, in the entire known world. That means that there are really only 26 different facial archetypes to choose from. Okay. Now, academia will tell you, well, that's because the way we bred, it was a bottleneck and they do all this mental gymnastics. It's pretty simple. Those are the templates right there. They made 26 different types of human. That was it. And it was this last reboot, this last reset where it says God hovered over the face of the deep. I believe that happened in a way different way than we think it did. Now, that's not to say that this being wasn't in tune with the God energy of the Holy Spirit, which would make him God. But that's not to say that he is the omnipotent, all powerful, God of everything. It gets real deep. And so I think cloning is just like you said, it's something to answer your questions. It's a very long-winded explanation, but to answer your question, cloning has been around for many, many cycles. If you take 300 million years, which is still a drop in the bucket compared to the 2 billion years that our planet's been around, 300 million years, and you do the math, that's like 75 off the top of my head. I don't know what the math is of that. If the cycles are 4,230,000 years, I think that's, I might be wrong, 75, roughly 75 cycles consisting of 4 periods of Satya Yuga, Tetra Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga, and the Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga always being the end of the cycle, which is what we're in right now. According to the
destruction.
Vedas, it's the age of destruction. Yeah. So when you look at like where we're at right now, we are coming, we are in the early stages of the Kali Yuga now, according to what the Hindu belief is. And there's a lot of other stuff going on, like Revelations kind of backs that up. So does the Quran, and so do the Buddhists. It's all kind of lining up, It says that what this is the end of an era. Now, that's not the end of the world. That's the end of an era, okay? After 10,000 years into the Kali Yuga, which we right now I think are 5,500 years. It started in 3,500 BC, something like that, or 2,000 BC. I think it's so. Yes, we're about 5,000 years in. So another 5,000 years, according to this is the Hindu tradition. I'm saying this is what I believe personally. I have my own beliefs, but what they say is that will be the end of spirituality. We were given a 10,000 year reprieve into the very beginning of the Kali Yuga. Now, if you keep going, eventually Christ returns, and his name is Krishna Kalik in the Hindu, but it was Krishna, Christ. And the Muslims, they say that he was the greatest prophet and Jesus is going to return and whatever. It's all lines up, the Christians and the Muslims, whatever. When that happens, he will reign for 1,000 years. Now you say that's not really a long time, but according to the tradition in different Buddhist sects and different Hindu beliefs, one divine years for the gods, or God, is 365 years. So that's 365,000 years. That would round out the Kali Yuga. So Jesus, the Holy Spirit, they gave us a reprieve. And the Holy Spirit it's hard to comprehend what that is. What that is the spirit and mind and power of God, the God mind, which can manifest in anything and anyone, even a being that is known as God the Father, who had the wherewithal to create Jesus Christ and inseminate a woman as a virgin and give birth. It's a miracle, I get it, but it's done through the power of the God mind because it's manifestation. Now, during the Satya Yuga, we were 30 foot tall. I know it sounds crazy, but we could do these things.
Not to me, not now.
Well, not now, but the power of will, you can do things because I've manifested many things just through the power of will. We are a beat down, small, stunted Cocker Spaniel version of what we once were because in the end, it
Yeah.
says in the Call of Duty that we're going to be like small little dwarf-like people, malformed and sickly. And people are like, well, that hasn't even happened yet. So that's not even, no, they think that we're going to get smaller. No. Compared to what we were in the Satra and Tatra yugas, yes, we are stunted, sickly little dwarf-like beings.
Ants.
Like
we're like ants.
We're nothing, yeah.
Puckwudgies.
But there has been many reboots and all these different, like, whatever has happened. So cloning has been around for a long time, and it's happened in every age for millions and millions of years. But what they're doing now is just the knowledge is still there. And these people, they have a thirst for this knowledge, but it's forbidden and it's bad knowledge. And they're trying to dig. Look up Bulgaria. Look up, it was Zarachina. It's TSAR, China. Zarachina. You look it up. It was in Bulgaria. It happened in 1992. I think the digging began in 1990 and it ended in 92. It culminated with them retrieving an Object 1, which was a 20-foot tall specimen known as the first atom, the interstellar atom. They were looking for this man. It was hermaphrodited being that was put there by an elder race of godlike beings that were basically aliens that came, and that was deep in the earth. They went miles down into the earth, the Bulgarian government. It was after the end of the Cold War.
Actually.
Sounds
like the Giant of Kandahar, actually. Well, I did remote view the Giant of Kandahar. And yeah, I mean, it was living like in an inner earth or something. And there's multiple giants down there. There's a lot of them. And
there's a whole bunch of different races down there.
Yeah. Our government actually was sent our military in, according to my data, okay, when I remote viewed it, they actually sent the military there to retrieve a specimen. And you know what that means. They went to go get a body.
There were some men in black that appeared at the end of this project. The lady that wrote a book about it, her name was Svetlana something. It's in Bulgarian. But if you look that up when you Google it, you can find it. The CIA actually has a document where they know about Object 1. They released information saying that we are aware of it. We knew about this project. We know that it happened. I don't know exactly if it was the Russian government or a joint effort between different governments that actually went in and took this body, this specimen. But anytime giants are found, they're scooped up. And we're told stories about them being taken to the Smithsonian, which I don't even believe that. If the Smithsonian had all these giants that are being scooped up, it would have to be 8 miles long. So
they might have in the day, though. They might have it first.
Maybe in the underground, under like tunnels or something, they put these specimens. But I don't believe that the Smithsonian is working as a go-between. What I believe, and I did a show called The Serbian Werewolf, where these people, they found a sarcophagus, and it was a 10-foot long dogman looking creature with a wolf-like head, and it was an amorphous creature. It had a human-like body. And this dog-headed wolf-like creature, the Smithsonian came, took it, offered to pay them $23 million or $34 million, something like that. They never got it. Then when they started to file suit against them and got a lawyer and everything, then they gave them like, I think, a few $1 million or whatever to just leave them alone. Well, the guy was a businessman who worked in Slovenia, and he had a lot of influence, and he was like, no, I'm not taking no $2-3 million. I want my money for what you took. They did manage to keep a sword that had a Templar type symbol on it. Wow. And it had a crest on the top of it, and it was put onto, me and my brother actually got to see this on Skype. We got to see this. It was really interesting. And anyway, you go into my archives of my hour-long audio shows, and that story is in there. But that is one example of them taking these giants, and what Object 1, when you read about the Bulgarian account of what they did, that was supposedly the first, that was what we were made from, was that particular human. And it was a prototype human, whatever, that was made, and he was 21 foot tall. It's very interesting when you go back and you look like how many reboots and resets we've had. This wasn't the first time. Like the Watchers, the Fall of the Watchers, the 200 Watchers, the Angels, they were not the first to come and be here, and they weren't the last, because Lucifer was here before them, of course, and he fell with a third of the angels of heaven. When you start to look at these happenings, these situations, you start to realize that this is like some sort of it's like, I don't want to use the word intergalactic, but it's something that's going on in the heavens. Now, there is a book called the Book of Giants, and it's fragmented. We are missing certain parts of the book, but you can kind of make out the story of what it is. And it's these giants talking amongst themselves about these dreams that they were having. And that the heavens, there was a war with the Elohim, which is the heavens, the gods of the heavens. Elohim is actually a plurality. That's not God. People mistranslate that. That's actually a plurality. And that's how it's translated from the Sumerian tablets, because a lot of the Old Testament was just taken and borrowed from the Sumerian tablets, because in 600 BC, which was when a lot of the Old Testament was transcribed, the Sumerian tablets predate it by like 4,000 years. So you're going back and you're saying, hey, this is stuff that was already written. The Hebrews took it and made it theirs and created their own story. That was because they were in captivity to the Persians, who kind of, before that, they conquered the Babylonians, so they kind of inherited them. The Babylonians had them in captivity. Before that, it was the Assyrians, and the Assyrians were the ones that, when God says in the Old Testament, "Behold, the rod of my anger, Assyria," because He was angry with the children of Israel for their sin. So He allowed Assyria to whip them, pretty much destroy them. And so all that was left were the two kingdoms in the south. Israel was destroyed. They were taken into captivity. Then the Babylonians took conquest and took over. And then the Persians took over. It was all basically Mesopotamia. Well, the Sumerian tablets were there. They would have had centuries to be amongst these people, holding on to their own Hebraic belief, but also to implement a sort of storyline for themselves, which became canon because it was hitched into the New Testament, the Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which there's a lot more to the Gospels, especially with the Apocryphals and the 100 to the Nag Hammadi Desert, whatever. When you start looking at all these different books from the New Testament, there's a whole bunch of gospel that's not in the canon. And there's a whole bunch of Old Testament that's not in the canon, but should be. And so when you go back and you read these texts and you study these, you start to realize that this is not one flowing, like it doesn't flow correctly. They try to make it like it's one long, like flowing story, and that there's just this one God doing all this stuff. And God, they attribute all these things to Yahweh, to God, which aren't really Yahweh. I look at it like they copied and pasted over, they just put His name there. Every time that there was a God like being doing something, it was Yahweh or Elohim. And that's why His name changes, Yahweh, Elohim, Jehovah, because they were different beings. But according to what they've done is they've made it to where it's just one God, so as to not be confused. There's a monotheism there, which kind of set them apart from the other tribes around there. One of the things that you look at, like in the Hindu belief, that Brahman, somebody argued with me the other day saying that they were polytheistic. I said yes and no. All of their gods are just one aspect of their one God, Brahman. Like every other god in their pantheon really is just an aspect of that god. So it's really just one god with a lot of different characteristics. But you can
it's
also
like the goddesses too. It's like Hathor. It's like there's Isis and all these other goddesses that actually are like the embodiment of Hathor, but they're all separate, but they're all the same. So
well, Aphrodite is connected to the underworld too, and then if you look at Aphrodite, she's got some of the characteristics of Hecate, which is also it's a very weird deity too. It's the goddess of death and destruction, but it's kind of like Kali,
magic.
Magic and of dogs, which is very odd.
Maybe she's a dog woman.
Well, when you look at the Shwara people, and if you look them up, Ecuador, okay, I believe it's Shaura. And I'm not going to get into we don't have a lot of time for that, but the Shwara people, they believed in a goddess that lived within the earth, and they were bringing to Father Crespi. He was a Franciscan monk that went there, and he worked with them, and he ended up with these golden tablets that were the histories of our civilizations, and he had a few weird artifacts that were from all over the world, but they were all found within this caverns in Ecuador by the Shwara people. They brought it to them because they liked Crespi, and he was kind to them, and they loved him. So they gave him all this gold, these artifacts. He didn't keep any of it. He lived as a pauper until the day he died, and he just wanted these artifacts to be studied. Well, it was cast off by academia as just a mere coincidence, and they don't know how this old man who hadn't traveled to all these places actually got all these artifacts. They don't really know, and they didn't care. And to this day, they've never been looked at with any real, discernment, which they're not trying to learn because they know already. But it was a goddess who created a male counterpart for herself. It's like the opposite of Genesis. But here's the weird thing: they fathered children who became a race of beings that lived within the inner earth. And one of the things they did was they created dogs. Now, these dogs, these weird beings that they created, became their guardians. And the Shora people talk about them as like, when you go down into those places, if you try to take things that aren't yours and you're not a part of that sect of people that worship this particular goddess and her husband, who's a minor deity, having been created by her, these dogs or dog-like beings will eat you. So, there's your Dogman right there.
That sounds familiar, actually. Yeah, I was going to say that sounds very familiar. It sounds like Dogman. I don't know. And to this day, giants have been popping up all over the world, Josh, and people are getting videos of giants. And there was one fella in particular, I think his name was Andrew Dawson. Recently, he was posting videos to TikTok where they saw a giant. He put it out for the world to see. He went back to go try to see it a little more up close.
Is it from Canada?
Canada, yeah. He ended up dead. Okay. He's dead. He died. Yeah. He was being followed. Yeah, he claimed he was being followed, and he had video of walking outside his house and unmarked cars sped off, and yeah, it was very odd. So I know I encourage the audience to look into that. But when he went back to go film this giant, an alleged giant, of course, there's people that are like, oh, it was a telephone pole or it was something else, it looked like a giant. But when he went, there was an Apache black helicopter flying overhead where that giant had been. There was a military or some sort of agency had put an installation on top of the mountain.
They want their DNA.
They want their DNA. That's exactly what I remote viewed with the giant of Kandahar. When I looked into that,
demons there, and they need bodies.
They wanted a sample of the DNA. That's exactly what the remote viewing data said. The giant of Kandahar, and I didn't know anything about these giants. I didn't know anything about the case, but that was what the data said, was that our government sent people in, our military in, to obtain a sample.
Well, look at the statue they made, and this is jumping around, but it's all connected. That's why you got to come to my show, and you can be filled in on everything. Jessica, I hope I can reach some people tonight that aren't a part of it, and they can see and they can come and learn. I retell people's stories and encounters. People come on my show and they tell their encounters or their stories. That's what we do. But I'm trying to give you the big picture. A lot of people can't follow that big picture. They don't want to follow that big picture. They want to know, oh, there's all these weird things going on. Why? Why? Because this is why. And I'm telling you, this is absolutely why. In the Bible, it talks about, you can look this up. I know it talks about I think it's in Revelations. My wife has it memorized, and I used to have all these passages memorized, but I don't have time right now to sit here and look it up. But you can look this up. It says that in the end, that if it were possible, even the elect would be deceived. But what that means is, if it were possible, what that's saying is basically that God's throwing you a bone. He's telling you, you are my elect. You are the chosen whatever. He gave you this intellect to use, not to just sit on, but to use, and to use your mouth to speak the words and tell people what's going on, and to not be deceived. And through discernment, you aren't deceived, because it's basically saying that you would be if you weren't of the elect. So it's going to deceive a lot of people. People are not understanding. Like, they made a statue of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This isn't a political. That. Yeah. What do you think that is? Why is her hair in the ram horn?
It looked demonic kind of in a way. I used to work. I was the head of a women's organization, so I've always been about women's rights and things like that. But that thing looked a little demonic. I saw
That
it.
is not a Ruth. The face isn't even hers. I don't know what that is. I don't know whose
Yeah,
face
it
that
was
is.
weird.
It's just weird. And they make these statues and those are that's an amalgamation of goddesses. One of the things I was going to tell your listeners is if you want to learn about the giants, you have to go into the inner earth. And I'm not talking about the Admiral Byrd. That's just scratching the surface. Go to the Shaver mystery. It was a story that was made in a magazine back in the 50s. Richard Shaver, he was a man who claimed to have been abducted and taken into inner earth for 8 years. He lived in a civilization run by an evil race of beings called the Darrow. He was a captive there, and they used people as like batteries, like human energy, like or even as food. And it was really weird. And it was on a magazine, a science fiction magazine called Amazing Stories, which actually turned into a show back in the 80s. I don't know, Jessica, if you're my age, but you might remember that show. It was on for a couple of years. Amazing Stories. I think it was NBC or something like that, or ABC.
Yeah,
One of those. Remember, network television used to be it. You had 3 television networks, and
we had 2, 5, 11, 17, and 36. Those were my channels. Yeah.
Yeah, you had like 3 or 4, right? And so
Yeah.
it was on there, and they just copied what and the editor of the head of the magazine, the editor-in-chief, was a guy named Ray Palmer. He believed Shaver. And of course, in 1954, they released this issue called The Shaver Mystery, but it was actually, he named it, I Remember Lemuria. Now, Lemuria is a name of an ancient continent that was off the coast of India, and it sunk. Okay, which there is archaeological evidence for that. It was the remnants of it would be Sri Lanka. When you look at the supposed Mount Shasta, people encounter these really tall giant beings. They call themselves Lemurians, or the last race. The Shaver mystery is really weird, and for years, like several years, him and Palmer worked together on Amazing Stories, and they would release in science fiction form these stories that Shaver would tell him that took place to him, in the inner earth as he was a prisoner there. And these people had technology. But I think that was just one area. That was just one spot. The inner earth is huge, and there are a ton of different civilizations and races down there, and they're not even, I think some of them aren't even totally aware of each other. But I think that it just depends on where you live, where you're from, what beings are under that earth. Now, when someone dies, whether it's an alien being or not, they have a soul, which is what powers your mind. You wouldn't have anything without that spark. Okay,
that's right.
It's like a ball of energy, ball of light. When the giants died, they were cursed. In the book of Enoch, it talks about they became evil spirits for all time. They are our demons. They are the Nephilim. They're the fallen. They're the demons. The fallen, the children of the fallen. The fallen themselves are actually chained up under the earth. And they're supposed to be there as long as the earth shall endure, which is a long time. They got another billion years.
Now, are they in inner earth? Is that where they're chained up? Is down in inner earth somewhere?
Absolutely, okay. They're imprisoned there, and so when you look at the Nephilim, they all died in the flood. Not all of them, but most of them died in the flood. They became what we know of as demons, but they can also reproduce ethereally too, because if you look at the story of Lilith, Samael was the first rebellious angel. It predates Lucifer. And when Samael found her, when she left the garden, in the Kabbalah, it talks about how she rejected Adam because she wanted to be the dominant one. And Adam said, no way. So they fought back and forth. And then she left. Samael found her, whose name in Hebrew means the venom of God. So we don't know for sure if that's like he's the venom spewing against God, or if he was once the arm of God and God used him to spew venom, whatever. We just know that that's what his name means, and he found her, and they reproduced, and they had all these children. Now, when anything dies, it becomes a spirit, because you are just a spirit inhabiting a body. So there's all these different beings and creatures that are out there in the ether, that are in the earth, within the earth, like in the book of Job, when the Elohim asked Job, where hast thou been? He says, I've been walking to and fro upon within the earth. Now, that being, they don't say he's Lucifer, they say he's Satan. Satan is also the name of a race of beings known as the Shaitan. And he could have just been the major player of the Shaitan. We know that when Solomon took over the demons, and he had them all come because God gave him the ring, because Orneus, the vampiric demon, was attacking one of his servants' children. God gave him a magic ring, the seal of Solomon. When he called forth the head demon, the master of all these demons at that time, his name was Asmodeus. He's distinctly different now than the Shaitan. This is a whole different thing. You know what I mean? Like that he was the guy in charge at that time. That doesn't mean that he was forever in charge. These beings are also not totally immortal either. Anyone and anything can die a second death. That's another thing people don't understand. But it is a bloodline, an ancient bloodline. When people talk about the worship of Moloch, who knows who they're worshiping now? When these people go up and they accept their award, I want to thank God. They're not thanking my God. They're not thanking your God. They're thanking their God, which is Moloch.
I've heard that. Yeah.
When one of the things that was really interesting when Solomon had a conversation with one of the demons named Beelzebub, he was a totally different being than Asmodeus. And he said, I lurk about in the Black Sea. My son haunts the Black Sea. He had a son. Like, this being is telling him, I have a son who is kind of in charge over there. Shall I go and retrieve him? And Solomon says, there's no need. We have you. Okay. This is very interesting. When you read these texts, you're going like, they're talking, they're having conversations with their mouths with these entities. Who they are and what they are, we're really not sure. It said that they were every manner and form of being that you could imagine with the human mind. Like, basically, like Solomon witnessed this. If this is to be taken as a true account of something, it's pretty fascinating. He was the son of David.
Yeah.
Now, you got to think about this. This is post-flood, okay? This is not antediluvian. I mean, this was after Noah, okay? And now Noah had several different names. I'm not going to get into them, but the Mesopotamian name was totally different. The Hebrews changed the name into a Hebrew name, which was Noah. But there were the flood was to kill these beings, to get rid of these beings, and to start over. And look at the Sumerian tablets. There were two brothers, and one was Enki. And his brother Enlil was like, we have to kill all these. We got to start over. The human race is out of control. They're fighting as proxies for these other beings. We had to get rid of them, blah, blah, blah. And Enki went to the Noah figure. I forgot his name right off the top of my head. But you can go look this up at the Sumerian tablets. And he says, there's going to be a flood. My brother is going to flood the earth. He's going to destroy everything. Get in this ark. Now, even as a child, I knew that these animals couldn't all fit in an ark, right? I mean, it just didn't make sense to me. I went to the zoo. And I was like, supposedly, the Christian school that I went to, the Abeka school, they said, we have the exact dimensions of the ark. And I was a little egghead kid, I'm not going to lie. So I went to the zoo, and I was like counting the animals, and I did the math on approximately. And I went to my parents first. I said, this is impossible. This ark and the dimensions of
these people are lying to us, Mom and Dad. Yeah. You were a conspiracy theorist before, right? As a kid.
I was 9 years old. And I said, this isn't correct. And I did the dimensions, and I went to my teacher, and she gave me spanking because corporal punishment was in full swing at that school, and I got hit for everything.
Mine too.
So it was terrible. That was a private school where they went to town on you. I mean, it was like,
I went to public school where they do that. Yeah.
Public school, they took some liberties at that. Abeka school was pretty ridiculous. I mean, anyway, I would never put my kids there, but here's the thing. I told this lady, look, this isn't correct. And she said, you're always in defiance of what we're trying to teach you. And I'm like, I just want the truth. And she's like, well, this is the truth. And I also told her at the age of 10, when I finally got away from that particular teacher, I said, that book is incomplete. And I got licked for that. And I said, that's not correct, because she was using the Schofield Bible, which was incomplete, because I had a different Bible at the house, which was a Roman Orthodox Catholic Bible. And I had an Orthodox Greek / Russian Bible that I'd bought at the bookstore. And so I was reading
years. As a kid.
I was about 10 or 11. I was trying
Beyond
to explain
your years, Josh.
And, well, it's been a struggle because people, they can't keep up. You're trying to tell them, look, and then you sound arrogant, or you're trying to debase them, and you're not. You're just trying to tell them, look, this isn't correct. There's a lot more going on. Yes, the ark was a DNA bank. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's Laura.
It was exactly what that was. And so I came to that conclusion, when I was a kid. I said there had to be something more going on. And when I first started to hear about DNA and understanding what it was as I got older, I was like, that is what happened. They used it and revived these animals
I
Yeah.
agree. I think so too. And that's why if they had that kind of technology back then, I mean, we're like basic. We're the state of our technology today is so basic compared to what it probably has been from the beginning of time. And so yes, human cloning is, it's like you said, it's like making Barbie dolls basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where they
You
started
know.
out with the cloning. Adam and all of us were meant to be workers, and we were to toil in the garden, and that was our job. Okay,
Wow.
was to be
Yeah.
workers. And then there was an argument between these beings, and one of them said, "Hey, we want to make them be able to procreate. We want to give them a companion." There's a lot of argument about what the tree of knowledge was, but we know that the God character in Genesis, which may or may not be the one true living God that is, they actually say, or it says, if they were to eat from the tree of life, then they would be like us and they would not die. So casting us out of the garden had to happen. Another passage in the in the Bible is when in Genesis 11 when it talks about the Tower of Babel and how we must go down there and destroy it, because if they complete this task, nothing will be impossible to them. So there again, there's another cataclysm that happens in Genesis 11. They come down and they, wipe us out again. People, whatever, scatter everybody and say, hey, don't congregate here and build this, whatever it is. Now, think about it. If it was just a brick and mortar building, why would God, the omnipotent, all-powerful God, the one that I serve, why would he care about that building? There's a building in Dubai that's the tallest building on earth that I'm sure is taller than the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
Why would he care? He's not going down there and destroying that, or the Empire State Building. No, he destroyed that because to me, that was a Stargate. If they would have achieved that and got into space and gone through time and space quantumly, what do you think that would have touched off a whole nother, ball of wax for the God type characters that were, in the Bible? People have said, oh, religion's been used for the worst atrocities, blah, 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 blah. Yes, yes. In the name of God, many people have done many bad things. And they point to Elisha, not Elijah, Elisha, being made fun of by children, where he had 200 children ripped apart by bears that he called out of the woods in the name of Yahweh. Like he says, you're making fun of me. And so people say, look at that. Look at the destruction of this. Look at the destruction of that. Look at how God treated us. Da, 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 da. But they're attributing all these negative things to God, which isn't correct. Now, when you read Exodus, when you talk about Exodus, like Moses, he was only allowed to see God walking from behind, right? Well, why? It says no one can witness or see God, but the prophet Elijah, not Elisha, who was Elisha's predecessor. Elisha was his pupil. Elijah saw him. Ezekiel saw him, and they were both taken up. And Ezekiel saw his chariot, which was like a wheel within a wheel. I mean, that's like a spacecraft. When David,
like a spaceship,
David saw Yahweh too, and he said he was breathing fire from his nostrils, and he said the description was like a dragon. It's very weird. And when you go into the Bible, 34 times they use dragon to describe something. It's 34 times in the Bible. In the standard KJV, the King James Version.
Could it be a button?
Yeah, that's the thing. We don't know for sure. Here's another nugget I wanted to drop before we had to go here. Edidorpa is another book that I talked about on my show the other day, but James Bartley had the floor and I couldn't really. But the guy that wrote the book was named John Uri Lloyd, and he talks about the inner earth, and he calls himself "I am the man." Well, it's I am the man that this happened to, but it's I am the man, and he refers to himself, and he talks about these reptilian beings down there, and one of them led him on this magical journey, and he found giant mushrooms, and they ate them, and it sounds like this dude was just tripping, right? But when you read that book, and of course it was written back in the 1890s or something like that, when you read that book, you go back and you study it, okay? The first thing that comes to mind when I saw the title back when I was young, I was probably like 17, I think, when I started to read that book, and it was Edidorpa. But when you look at it and you stare at the word Edidorpa, it's actually Aphrodite, spelled backwards.
Oh, no way.
And Aphrodite came to him and said that she was this goddess, deity, being, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
Well, a lot of people have linked that being and the mythical Aphrodite, the seductress, to
Mm-hmm.
being either Lilith or Naoma would have been the first to seduce the angels. She seduced Azazel, was the head of the fallen, and that was what spawned the giants. That was where they came from. Was the
Whoa.
interaction between these angels and mankind.
Yeah.
Is that her? We don't know for sure. We just know that after that transgression, they were turned into bird-like creatures that looked like harpies. And then there's another book that you guys can go to, and it was written by a guy named Edward. His middle name always gives me trouble. Bulwer. I think it's Bulwer. Anyway, his last name is Lytton. It's Lytton. And he wrote a book about the inner earth. And that is another book that if anybody, he was a Mason. I can't remember like exactly what year he wrote the book, but you can look him up. And I'm sure if you just go to Wikipedia and you wiki it, it'll probably pop right up and it'll tell you what he did and who he was. And he was another one that went into the inner earth and saw all these amazing things and did all these amazing things. And he met these different races of beings. Anyway, he wrote a book called The Coming Race. And those books I recommend to anyone who wants to learn and go forward and understand what it is that they saw. And like I said, this started with me as a 15-year-old seeing what I thought was a werewolf. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
You know, my friend's mother, the one I saw it with, his mother died back in 2011. She was a great woman. She was my second mom, my spiritual mom, one of my spiritual mothers. And she was a mentor to me. And she told me, Mijo, there's something that's going to happen to you and my son. This is why you saw what you saw. She always said that. And she would talk. And of course, I'm 16, 17. I was going to be on the road that I was going to be on. And I was like, yeah. And I'm going to do great things and blah, blah, blah. Well, she always thought that I was going to be a preacher. Well, it turned out that her son became the preacher. And he's a preacher in my hometown now.
You could be one, Josh. You're good. You know a lot.
I do preach in a way, but it's
You're
a
fantastic.
different type of gospel. It goes deeper, you know, where he's bringing people to the Lord, and I respect that totally, but I'm doing it in a different way. But his mother predicted that we were going to go out into the world and preach. But she really thought that I was going to be a preacher too. And she thought that that's why
you kind of are one.
Well, if that wouldn't have happened to me, who knows? Because
the Paranormal Round Table preacher, I tell you.
God works in mysterious ways.
I like it. You know what? But you have a huge audience, Josh, and I think this is where you're meant to be. Yeah. So it's perfect. It works out probably even better, you know, because you actually have an audience of people who probably don't usually all go to church and things, you know, don't go to the organized religious sites and things, you know. It's another community that you're meant to reach.
Somebody said something in your chat here. He says, okay, I want to answer this question. I thought I was going to sneeze. Okay. Jorgen Johansson says, pray as much as you like, if you like, but God are never going to interact. Yeah, it says here, interact in your life. And why should he help just you and not starving people in Africa? Have they prayed too bad? Jorgen, everybody prays to what they believe to be God, and everybody has their own reality of what they believe is reality. And it's all based on a perspective. Perception is your reality. So whatever their reality is, that's what happens. Now, I personally believe in the will of Dharma, and I believe in karma, and I believe in reincarnation. And I believe when you reincarnate, you end up where you're supposed to be. There was a guy from Brazil that was talking about, he was walking, he made a video, I can't remember his name, it was about 2 years ago. He was walking through the slums, and he said, these people have been born into this poverty for past life. Or it's to accomplish a goal or to achieve a goal. You have to go through the suffering. And God is acutely aware of that. The God mind, God, whatever you want to call him, the Father of Christ, who I serve, he doesn't interfere with that. It's what you do in that station and that level. When I was in Africa, I met people who were hungry and starving and not doing well. Some of them weren't, some of them were. And one of the things I noticed was that a lot of people there were happy. They lived in thatch huts and they ate what they could find and they were happy. Yet I have neighbors that are rich and they're unhappy and they're miserable and they're in this rat race maze of keeping up with the Joneses. It's all based on perspective. I mean, you know, so those people, I don't know who or what they're praying to, but you can't necessarily just pray your way out of a situation. God helps those that help themselves is a very true statement, because you have to go and do the work. I spent part of my youth locked up. You don't think I prayed to God every day, but God was like, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. You put yourself in that position. That's what you got to do. Now, when I lost everything, when I was a younger man in my late 20s, early to mid to late 20s, I cried to God for 2 years. I was like, I don't want to be an $8-9 an hour security guard, whatever. I could go back to my old life of whatever I was doing, which wasn't legit really. And it was real easy. It was right there because I was working. I could see my life right there, in the downtown area. And I could have easily gone back to it. So I started crying to God. I said, God, is this it? Well, is this all I'm going to do? I'm just going to sit here. And then, it was like the Holy Spirit just goes, bam, you are where you're supposed to be, and you have to do what you have to do. And I came to the realization that I was actually lucky that I didn't end up worse in my situation. Because don't ever ask, can it get worse? Because it absolutely can. No matter what your situation is,
it can always get worse. That's
God
right.
pulled me out.
It can always get better too, though.
Right. I dwelt in the darkness for 7 years. I counted it, 7 years. I was like, dude, 7 years. That is a very powerful number. I'm also 7 life path. God pulled you out. Boom.
Yeah.
Then he sets you up. I make more money now than I ever did as a bad guy, doing what's right. Now, am I the most righteous man on earth? Heck no, dude. Everybody sins. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody screws up. But it's up to you what you do with that, because everything is a learning, a possible learning. The Hindus believe that in the Kali Yuga, that is the easiest time to transcend. It is easier than any of the other ages. In the darkest, evilest age, it is the easiest time to transcend, because all you have to do is call out and say, hey, forgive me, I need this. And Krishna, as they call him, will help you to transcend. Now, I'm not saying I 100% believe that, because I believe his name is Christ, Jesus, whatever, but it works. It really does. But it's up to you to do the work. You can't just accept him. You have to follow through. And you can't just do good deeds and not, because the only way to the true one, all-powerful living God is through him. And I tell people that, and they think I'm preaching. And like I said, I could be a preacher, but I'm telling you right now, there's a reason for that. There's laws and codes and rules. I mean, there's sacred geometry. There's all this stuff, and it's there for a reason. It exists.
Yeah. Yeah. You just got to decode it, go after it, and live on your highest timeline, everybody. Okay. And yeah. I mean, I have so many stories about inner Earth and the stargates and the inner Earth entrances that I come across with my remote viewing data. We're going to continue this conversation in the future, Josh, because this has been fantastic. Where can people find you, and when do you do your live streams?
I hang out in a utility closet and a construction site, and I just kind of sit there rocking back and forth. And
that's where people can find you. I mean, online. I know. Josh, I mean, online, Paranormal Round Table on YouTube.
Paranormal Round Table on YouTube. You already know. So Paranormal Round Table on YouTube. Find me there when I'm not in my utility closet, like trying to atone for my
rocking and crying.
Yes.
Right.
So that's where I'm at.
Oh my gosh.
I'm on Facebook. We have a huge group on Facebook, Paranormal Round Table group. Join me, join us, talk to me. I'm pretty accessible to my fans. Listeners,
yes, you are.
Fans, but listeners,
Yeah, and everybody, please, y'all check out his conference, the Dogman. There's going to be a Paranormal Round Table in, I believe that's September, right?
Yeah.
So keep us posted on that, okay?
And I hope you go this time.
I will totally. I'm planning to come. I've got to. Okay, it'll be fun.
Sure.
All right, Josh. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight. This has been so amazing. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. See ya. All right, y'all. Don't forget that right after this show, After Hours has an amazing show. They're ready to go for the next 3 hours. Next time on Off the Trails, I'm going to have Fred in Alaska here, Fred Roll. We're going to be talking about the Alaska Hairy Man and some other cool cryptids up in Alaska. All right, y'all. I can't wait. But for now, I'm headed off the trails. Y'all know me. I'm the Cryptid Huntress. I will see you guys next weekend. Have a wonderful week. Check my shows out at the Cryptid Huntress on YouTube. Y'all go subscribe. Have a good night. Bye.